In December 1938, as the world held its breath on the brink of the greatest war in history, a vessel departed the port of Hamburg in the utmost secrecy, a vessel destined to become part of one of the most enduring and unsettling legends of the Third Reich. This was the catapult ship Schwabenland, its official purpose a German Antarctic expedition. On paper, everything appeared respectable: the exploration of new territories, securing the German whaling industry, and scientific research. The expedition was commanded by the seasoned polar explorer, Captain Alfred Richer. But behind this scientific facade lay a far different, more sinister objective, dictated not by economics, but by the occult ideology of the SS. The expedition's true ideologues were not Richer, but men whose names did not appear on the official rosters. These were the theorists of the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Society. They were convinced that the icy continent at the planet's south pole was not merely a lifeless wasteland. According to their doctrine, a blend of ancient myths and pseudoscientific theories, Antarctica was either the remnant of sunken Atlantis or the location where beneath the immense ice sheet lay an entrance to the inner Earth. A vast hollow realm where an ancient, highly advanced civilization of Aryan progenitors still existed. To find this entrance, establish contact, and gain access to their knowledge and technology, this was the expedition's true mission. The expedition reached the shores of Antarctica in January 1939. Over several weeks, Luftwaffe aircraft launched from the deck of the Schwabenland surveyed and photographed a vast territory of over 600,000 square kilometers. They named this area New Swabia and immediately claimed it as part of the German Reich, dropping swastika-emblazoned pennants from the air. Captain Richer's official report, presented upon his return to Germany, was filled with scientific data on geology, climate, and the ice cover, but it contained not a single word about the most important discovery, the one that, according to rumor, changed everything. According to the legend, one of the reconnaissance planes, piloted by Lieutenant Schermacher, discovered something incredible. In the midst of the endless icy desert, he saw an oasis and ice-free area with several lakes of warm water. But that was not the most astonishing part. In the center of the oasis, at the foot of a mountain range, gaped a dark chasm, the entrance to a gigantic cave from which a faint but palpable warmth emanated. This was exactly what they had been looking for. After this discovery, the story fractures into dozens of contradictory versions. The official archives are silent. But in the post-war years, fragmentary evidence, diaries, and testimonies began to surface, painting a picture of a grandiose secret operation. It was alleged that immediately after the Schwabenland's return, Hitler gave a secret order to begin construction of an underground base in New Swabia, codenamed Base 211. Throughout the war, from 1940 to 1945, special submarine convoys were supposedly sent to Antarctica. They transported not only tunneling equipment, scientists, and SS personnel, but also the Reich's most valuable technologies, including prototypes of disc-shaped flying machines, nuclear research blueprints, and perhaps even the Bell itself. This base, hidden from the entire world beneath a kilometer-thick sheet of ice, was to become the final refuge for the Nazi elite. It was a place where they could wait out their defeat in the war, preserve their technology, and prepare for revenge. Some theories went even further, claiming the Germans had managed to establish contact with the inner Earth civilization and create a joint hybrid enclave. For decades, this was all considered nothing more than a conspiracy-fueled fantasy born from the chaos of the post-war era. Until, in 2018, a lot was sold at a private auction in Zurich that forced historians to look at this legend in a new light. It was the personal diary of an NCO named Wilhelm Lange, who had served as a radio operator on one of Admiral Dinitz's Wolfpack U-boats. The diary, purchased by an anonymous collector for a fabulous sum, described a secret mission his submarine, U-530, undertook in the final days of the war. Officially, this submarine surrendered to Argentine authorities in July 1945, 2 months after Germany's capitulation. The boat's commander, Otto Wermuth, was never able to clearly explain where his vessel had been all that time. Lange's diary provided an answer, and it was a shocking one. Lange wrote that in late April 1945, their submarine took aboard several high-ranking SS officers and a number of sealed bronze containers in the port of Kiel, which were guarded with extreme care. Their orders were simple: head south. The final destination was not marked on any maps. The commander received only a set of coordinates and instructions to proceed submerged, surfacing only to charge the batteries. The journey lasted more than 2 months. The crew suffered from a lack of food and fresh water, but the SS officers maintained an icy calm. In early July, they reached the coast of Antarctica. The landscape was unearthly, Lange wrote, giant walls of blue ice reaching up into a leaden sky. The silence was so profound it rang in my ears. Following instructions, they entered a narrow fjord that seemed to lead into the very heart of the continent. After several hours of navigating through icebergs, they saw what Lange called the gates of hell. It was a perfectly sheer wall of ice, in which a dark, rectangular opening was visible, like the entrance to a gigantic dock. As the U-boat approached, a beam of bright light shot out from the opening, and an unseen force began to pull the submarine inside. What Lange described next resembled a dream or a feverish delirium. Their submarine found itself in a huge, artificially lit dock carved directly out of the ice. The temperature inside was a comfortable 15 degrees Celsius. On the pier, they were met by men in SS uniforms, but with no insignia. But there were others, tall, slender figures in silvery, form-fitting jumpsuits. Lange could not see their faces. They were hidden beneath helmets of dark glass. But their movements were fluid, almost inhuman. The cargo, the bronze containers, and the officer passengers was unloaded. The commander of U-530 was given a new order to leave immediately and surrender to the nearest neutral port. Before their departure, one of the men in silver approached Commander Wermuth and handed him a small metal object. Lange described it as a disc of a dark, shimmering metal covered in strange, glowing symbols. It was a payment or perhaps a warning. The return journey was a nightmare. Half the crew suffered from hallucinations. The navigation instruments malfunctioned constantly. Lange himself wrote that he was plagued by dreams of giant subterranean cities and faces without eyes. When they finally reached Argentina, they were immediately arrested. During interrogations, Commander Wermuth was as silent as a fish, and the disc he had received in Antarctica had vanished without a trace. Lange's diary might have remained just another fantastic story, if not for one detail. On the final page, a drawing was scratched out. It was a crude diagram of what he had seen in the ice dock. And on it, besides the pier and the submarine, was another object standing in the far corner of the hangar. An object whose shape perfectly matched the blueprints from the Rocklaw archive. It was the bell. This discovery spurred the world's intelligence agencies into action. A secret international mission was organized, equipped with the latest radar equipment and ice drilling technology. Their target, New Swabia, to find Base 211 and learn what has truly been hiding beneath the Antarctic ice for nearly a century. They were preparing to encounter the descendants of Nazis, abandoned bunkers, and old technology. But they did not know that the masters of Base 211 had long been expecting their visit, and they were not alone. The secret expedition, codenamed Ice Hammer, arrived off the coast of Queen Maud Land in the height of the Antarctic summer in January 2024. The team, composed of top specialists from around the world, polar explorers, geophysicists, military engineers, set up camp on the ice shelf, several dozen kilometers from the supposed location of Base 211. Their main tool was a unique ground-penetrating radar capable of scanning the ice to a depth of 4 kilometers. The first few weeks yielded no results. The ice sheet seemed monolithic. But then, as they began scanning the area of the Mulig-Hoffman Mountains, where Schirmacher's oasis was rumored to be, the instruments detected an anomaly. This was no mere void. At a depth of 2 kilometers, the radar revealed the presence of a gigantic, geometrically perfect structure. It was enormous, comparable in size to a small city. But the most astonishing thing was that the structure was radiating a faint heat. The temperature inside the anomaly was 20 to 30 degrees higher than the surrounding ice. It was irrefutable proof. They had found it. Base 211 was not a myth. The next phase was drilling. A specially designed thermal drill began to slowly chew its way through the ice. It was a long and dangerous job. At a depth of about 1 kilometer, the drill hit something hard. It was not rock. Analysis of the samples showed it to be an alloy of titanium and tungsten with traces of an unknown polymer, a technology unavailable in the 1940s. They had breached the roof of the base. When the borehole was ready, an unmanned probe equipped with cameras and sensors was sent down. What it transmitted back to the surface silenced even the most hardened skeptics. The probe descended into a vast, dimly lit space. It was the base's central dome. The walls were not made of ice, but of a smooth, black material like obsidian. In the center of the dome stood several buildings of a strange, non-human architecture, windowless, with fluid, organic lines. And between them stood the crafts, several disc-shaped flying machines, the very same Haunebu that featured so often in conspiracy theories. They were not rusty and abandoned. They looked as if they had just rolled off an assembly line. Their silvery metal hulls gleamed dully in the light of the probe's spotlight. There were no people to be seen, neither in SS uniforms nor in silver jumpsuits. The base appeared to be dead. The decision was made to send down a special forces team. For soldiers in Arctic exoskeletons, armed with state-of-the-art weaponry, began their descent down the borehole. As they set foot on the floor of the central dome, the first thing that struck them was the air. It was warm, clean, and smelled faintly of ozone. The gravity was slightly lower than Earth's, and an absolute, oppressive silence reigned. The team began to move cautiously toward the nearest building. The door, devoid of handles or locks, hissed open before them as if sensing their approach. Inside was a long, white corridor, its walls glowing with a soft, even light. The corridor led them to a huge hall that appeared to serve as both a laboratory and a museum. Glass display cases lined the walls, but what was inside them defied comprehension. In one case was a perfectly preserved skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. In another, the armor of a 14th century samurai. In a third, a working model of James Watt's steam engine. Further on, a moon rock brought back by the Apollo 17 mission. And in the very center of the hull, floating in a huge cylinder filled with a clear, viscous liquid, was a human brain connected to hundreds of impossibly thin, glowing cables. It was a collection, but not of objects. It was a collection of key moments in human history. Suddenly, a voice filled the hall. It did not come from speakers. It manifested directly in their minds. The voice was calm, devoid of emotion, and spoke in perfect German with a faint Bavarian accent. "Welcome," the voice said. "We have been waiting for you." The soldiers froze, raising their weapons. "Who are you?" the team leader asked. "Where is the personnel of this base?" The personnel fulfilled their purpose and were disposed of, the voice replied. "They were useful tools, but their time has passed. As has yours, for that matter. You call us by many names. Inner Earth, Agartha, Aryans. Your ancestors who built this base called us their gods, but we are not gods. We are gardeners." On one of the walls, which had been monolithic moments before, an image appeared. It was a star map, but it did not show the Sol system. It was a different system, with 2 suns and 7 planets. "We came from there," the voice continued. "Your planet is but one of our gardens, an experimental plot. We sow the seeds of life and then observe their development. Sometimes the harvest is good, sometimes it is blighted by disease. Your civilization, humanity, is a disease. You are aggressive, destructive, and unpredictable. You have come too close to technologies you are incapable of controlling. Your ancestors, the Germans, were the first to realize this. They sought us out to gain power. We gave them crumbs of knowledge to see what they would do with them. And they immediately tried to use them to annihilate their own kind. The experiment has failed. What are you going to do? The commander asked, feeling a cold sweat trickle down his back. The same thing any gardener does when the garden is overrun with weeds, the voice answered. We are going to clear it. Start over. The process has already begun. This base is not a sanctuary. It is a launch platform. And you are the ignition key. In that instant, all the lights in the base went out, sirens began to wail, and the disc-shaped crafts in the central dome began to come to life. Their hulls became covered in a web of glowing lines, and they began to rise slowly, silently into the air. The voice in the soldiers' minds spoke its final words. Your German friends sought a gateway to paradise here. They found only a door to hell. They opened it. And you, with your arrival, have released what was waiting behind it. Thank you for your cooperation. On the surface, in the expedition camp, the scientists watched in horror as a blinding pillar of light erupted from beneath the ice at the drill site, shooting high into the stratosphere. And then, one by one, silvery discs began to fly out of the ice sheet, scattering in different directions toward different continents. Communication with the team below was lost. The experiment known as humanity was reaching its logical and terrifying conclusion. What happened next, the world would remember as the day of silence. The silver discs that had burst from beneath the Antarctic ice did not attack cities with missiles or incinerate them with lasers. They employed something far more terrible. Hovering over the planet's largest megacities, New York, Tokyo, Moscow, London, Beijing, they emitted a silent, invisible pulse. And in these cities, all electromagnetic activity simply ceased. Internal combustion engines stopped working. The screens of smartphones and computers went dark. Radio stations fell silent and communications were severed. The electricity in the grids vanished. A civilization built on energy and information was instantly thrown back to the Stone Age, but that was only the beginning. The pulse didn't just affect technology, it affected people. It erased the complex neural pathways responsible for abstract thought, for language, for accumulated knowledge. People didn't die, they simply forgot. They forgot how to speak, how to read, how to use the simplest tools. They devolved into frightened, bewildered animals with no understanding of who they were or what was happening. Civilization was not destroyed, it was erased. In the Ice Hammer expedition camp, chaos reigned. There was no contact with the outside world. Satellite phones had become useless pieces of plastic. But their equipment, shielded against the extreme polar conditions, had partially survived, and they could see. They saw on their radar screens as dozens more silver discs continued to emerge from beneath the ice sheet. The voice in their heads was gone. The gardeners had done their work and were now simply observing as their garden was cleared of weeds. The expedition leader, Dr. Anya Volkova, realized that they were one of the few remaining pockets of reason on the planet, and that their mission had transformed from one of exploration into a last desperate attempt to save something, anything. But what could they do? They were only a few dozen people, trapped at the edge of the world against a power capable of erasing civilizations. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the computers analyzing the data transmitted by the probe before it went offline suddenly produced a signal. It had detected another, hidden anomaly within the base's structure. Deep beneath the central dome, in the bedrock itself, was another isolated object. And it was not emitting heat, but a monstrous cold. The temperature inside it approached absolute zero. and it was protected by an energy field that had apparently shielded it from the mind-wiping pulse. "It's their core," said Volkova. "Their control center, or maybe their weak spot. If we can get to it, we might have a chance, but how could they reach it?" There was neither time nor resources to drill again. Then one of the military engineers studying old German maps of New Swabia found in the archives pointed to an inconspicuous detail. On one of the maps in the area of Schirmacher's oasis was a mine shaft number 7, supposedly for mining uranium ore. But the shaft was marked not as an industrial site, but with the Odal-Runa symbol of heritage and home in SS mysticism. Their last hope was that the Nazis, while building a base for their gods, had left themselves a backdoor. A secret path to the heart of the complex, one not controlled by the gardeners. Gathering all their remaining equipment and weapons, a small band of survivors set off on a suicide mission across the ice desert in their tracked vehicles. They found the shaft. The entrance was buried under ice and snow, but they managed to clear it. Inside was not just a tunnel, but an elevator shaft plunging kilometers deep. And the elevator, covered in frost, was, astonishingly, still functional. Descending, they found themselves in narrow service corridors, built not of the smooth black material, but of rough concrete and rusting steel. This was the work of humans. The corridors were littered with the decayed corpses of men in SS uniforms. Here, unlike the central hall, there had been a massacre. Laser scorch marks on the walls, molten metal, skeletons turned to dust. It seemed the gardeners had dealt brutally with their builders once the base was complete. But some of the Germans had apparently managed to fight back. In one of the side rooms, which looked like a commander's office, they found him. A skeleton in a rotted SS Obergruppenführer uniform. He was clutching a Walther pistol, and on the desk before him lay an open diary. The last entry read, "They betrayed us. We were just expendable material to them. They never meant to share power. They meant to destroy us along with everyone else. The Führer was right. They cannot be trusted. But I have left them a parting gift, a gift from humanity. Checkmate, you bastards from another world." Beneath the diary lay a schematic. It was a diagram of the base's power core, the very same cold object they had detected. But the diagram showed another element that hadn't appeared on their radar data, a manual emergency shutdown terminal. And next to it, an inscription, "When alles verloren ist, bleibt nur die Reich." When all is lost, only revenge remains. They understood the last Nazi's plan. He couldn't win, but he had created a self-destruct mechanism for the base. Fighting their way through the final corridors, fending off automated security drones that were still active, Volkova's team broke through to the core. It was a gigantic chamber, in the center of which hung an absolutely black sphere that absorbed all light and radiated an unbearable cold. This was the generator of the mind-wiping field. And next to it, on a small panel, was a single red button. The moment Volkova reached out to press it, the voice reappeared in their minds. But this time, it was not calm. It was laced with panic. "Don't do it. You don't understand. This isn't just a generator. It's an anchor. It holds this universe stable. If you shut it down, you won't just destroy us. You will destroy everything. You've already destroyed everything," Volkova replied and slammed the button. The black sphere did not explode. It began to shrink, to collapse into an infinitely small point. And the entire base began to fall apart. Space and time warped around them. The walls bent. The floor fell away beneath their feet. They ran back to the elevator, pursued by a wave of pure nothingness that consumed everything in its path. They managed to reach the surface a second before all of New Swabia, along with the base and the mountains, collapsed into a singularity, leaving behind only a giant, smoking hole in the ice. Across the world, the silver disks, deprived of their power source, simply fell from the sky like dead birds. They had survived, but into what kind of world? Returning to the ruins of their civilization, they saw people learning to make fire again, people painting hunting scenes on cave walls, people looking up at the stars with primal fear and wonder. The gardeners had been wrong. They hadn't destroyed humanity, they had given it a second chance. A chance to start over, free from the weight of past mistakes. And now, Anya Volkova and the handful of survivors from the Ice Hammer expedition had become the keepers of the old knowledge, new Prometheans in a new, savage world. Their task was not to rebuild the old civilization, but to help the new one avoid repeating its fatal errors. The story of humanity was not over, it had simply returned to its beginning. And this time, perhaps, things would be different.